Every top main hates playing against ranged champions. Not only are they completely unfun to play against as a melee character, but a ton of them also scale ridiculously well into the late game. So, not only do you lose early game, but you never have a hope of coming back. It's stupidly unfair, right? Now, you're tilted, and what ends up happening is that you go and play the ranged champion yourself. You'll show everyone just how freelo it is to play a ranged top laner, and now you're inting out of your mind. Great. So why is this? Why do ranged tops feel so overpowered when you're against one, but feel impossible to execute on when you're the one playing them? That's exactly what we'll be covering in this guide. We'll be talking about the most common issues players face and how to instantly fix them so that you can start dominating every game by abusing ranged top laners too. And if you want to climb ranks as a top laner, then we have a limited time offer for you. We created a special course on our website showing how you can climb to Diamond in 30 days as a top laner. This course has received insanely positive reviews on our website. Not only are a ton of people saying it's the best course we have ever created, but they're also getting massive rank increases that we've never seen before. By unlocking this full course, you not only get access to every episode in the series, but also 23 additional videos documenting every step of the climb from silver to diamond. This course alone took us over 1 month to create and is essential if you want to improve and see results. For a limited time, we're offering a discount through the link in the description below. So, what are you waiting for? Click the link and start ranking up. Alright, now back to the guide. To become a truly annoying top ranged player, we obviously have to begin with the laning phase, as that's where most of your agency for winning the game will be. That being said, there is a very common mindset that truly trips up ranged players way too often, and it's so easy to fix instantly. Just because you have a range advantage does not mean that you need to harass every single last hit, go up 100 CS at 8 minutes, have permanent prio, invade your opponent's house and steal their cat, all while meal prepping your entire week. This is a super important mindset. Remember that it is okay to chill. One of the best qualities of most ranged top laners is their scaling, as we mentioned at the start. Believe it or not, it is genuinely fine to go even in your games versus a melee opponent sometimes. Maybe you got jungle pressured, maybe you misplayed a trade, it doesn't matter what happened. Just know that it is not a complete failure if you don't completely dumpster your lane. As a quick example, take a look at this Jace. Based on his scoreline, he's not super fed or anything, but he's finally about to hit his Muramana power spike. At this point in the game, Jace does great damage no matter how well he did in lane and can start crushing the map as he normally would. On a lot of ranged champions, it's totally fine if you don't crush lane, because you'll be useful no matter what later on. It's especially true depending on what type of setup you're running. For example, if you've gone full scaling AP Kennen and don't have the Airy Doran's Blade setup, then you shouldn't expect to have early good harass. A lot of ranged champions actually don't even deal that much damage in the early levels because of defensive options like Doran's Shield and Second Wind. So, overly trying to play aggressive can often backfire on you. Surely you've all tried to harass early, but taken more minion damage than you dealt to your opponent. Yeah, that is totally a thing, so don't feel too pressured on winning early, since it's not always possible depending on matchups, setups, or jungle intervention. In fact, the most annoying ranged top laners aren't the ones that tunnel vision on constantly auto-attacking. The way to be the most annoying player possible is to just play for standard win conditions like you would on a typical melee character, playing around minion waves, level spikes, item timings, etc. That's still how you'll win every single lane as a ranged top laner. It doesn't change just because you can lane bully. To show you why we're emphasizing this just so much, let's take a look at a Platinum Elo Kennen who does the exact opposite of everything we're talking about. Not only does he have the early matchup advantage, but he's gone for the most lane aggressive build that you can possibly think of as well. The problem is, he's so tunnel visioned on harassing Aatrox that he's fumbling so many basic things. In fact, he's even down in CS despite having a health lead, just because that's the only thing that he is focusing on. Players like this tend to make a ton of mistakes during the early laning phase, which never lets them capitalize on their big advantage. They're also overly confident just because they're ranged, and end up disrespecting their opponents far too much, often throwing their lead. For example, look at how he disrespects Aatrox, walking right at him here and losing a big chunk of his health. Moments later, take a look at another bit of disrespect. Kennen has it in his mind that he's the bully and that his opponent can't do anything about it. So he just randomly walks right into melee range of the Aatrox. Rightfully so, he gets punished hard. And then he even refuses to base despite being at 10% HP and eventually ends up dying. It looks so obvious and terrible, but when we review lower elo ranged players, even up to Plat and Diamond, this is the main thing holding people back. You're not an invincible god just because you're ranged. The way to really abuse ranged matchups in solo queue is to just play around the same fundamentals that you would as a melee champion, but abuse them just a little bit more. Just like in melee versus melee matchups, you should look to punish when your opponent CS's. You just happen to be able to do it a little more often since you're ranged. You can take minion advantages more often with your superior wave control to potentially build slow pushes and harass off crashes, etc, etc. It's all the same stuff you do as a melee champion, just better or more frequently. Which brings us to another key point. If you're going to be abusing the fact that you have more wave control more often, it obviously means that you're going to be pushed into your opponent's tower more and more. As you watch Neeko really bully this enemy Nasus, it's been very clear where the Rammus has been the entire time. Neeko is keeping a careful eye on the minimap, which is why she's playing so aggressively for so long here. But notice that the second Neeko doesn't have any good intel on where Rammus is, that she begins to back off. Yes, she is sitting on a mountain of gold, but ideally you'd stay here and either kill or force this super low HP Nasus out of lane before recalling yourself. But Neeko's restraint pays off, since she knew that this could be a dangerous timing where she would get ganked. Thankfully, Neeko was already in a safe position, making getting away from this gank a breeze. Now, many of you may see this as a, gee, thanks for telling me to play safe when I might get ganked, really helpful, type of moment. And yeah, but that's precisely why we really wanted to hammer it in that you don't need to stomp every lane phase. It's obvious when you're watching this in a guide, sure, but almost every single top lane main who plays ranged champions is so desperate to build massive leads that they disregard the clear risks right in front of them. They would inevitably keep pushing and throwing their leads. This Neeko isn't a good ranged player because of their mechanics. It's literally just the restraint of being like, yeah, I could probably get really far ahead here if I take a risk and stay, but I don't need to. I scale pretty well anyway. Another simple thing that'll make your life infinitely easier is running double combat summoners on most ranged tops. To explain why, we should talk about teleport first. We've covered this in other guides, but you don't run teleport for mid or late game macro. That's definitely not the reason people run it. The main point for why challenger and pro players run teleport is almost always for lane security and dominance. Teleport became a staple in top lane first because this is the lane where wave control matters the most due to the melee versus melee nature of the lane. Having to base at a bad wave timing is asking to be heavily punished since you're in such a long lane and so vulnerable to ganks and harass. So top laners inevitably started taking teleport to abuse wave timings and to make sure that they can never be frozen on at a really bad time. And this eventually bled into mid lane and sometimes ADCs. Teleport has been so prevalent at high levels of play for so long for this single reason. This is important. You're not missing out on much by not having teleport in the mid and late game. It's really not that important for macro, trust us. And the reason that you can run double combat summoners as a ranged top laner is because you almost always have control of the wave during the lane phase. Therefore, you're very rarely going to take bad recalls anyway, diminishing the value of taking TP. And having double combat summoner spells can really let you own a lot of matchups. Being able to abuse your opponents when you otherwise couldn't have is a great perk of being a ranged top laner, and you should definitely be making use of this advantage. Trust us, you're going to get way more kills, especially in low elo, by having that extra utility or damage by going something like Ghost or Ignite. Not only that, but countering what your opponents want to do with your summoner spell can be game winning. For example, this Neeko took Cleanse because of the double value it has versus a Nasus and Rammus. Being able to counter what their main abilities do was a great way for her to really stomp this lane. Moving on, before laning phase ends, there is a quick tip that we want to give. Sometimes when you're winning lane, your jungler will want to come break the tower with you using Rift Herald. Tell them as politely as you possibly can to get out of your lane. Remember, you technically don't want the laning phase to end all that quickly. This is when your opponent is suffering the most, and you can take big advantage if you're playing the matchup well. Why would you want that to end quickly? If you take tower too soon, most ranged tops aren't really good at running around the map and killing players. You're not like a Camille or Malphite who have great on-demand mobility and CC. Ranged champions are at their strongest when laning versus someone, so don't take the tower too early if you can help it. Not only that, but if you're inevitably going to take the tower yourself anyway, wouldn't you want all that gold for yourself? Sharing all those turret plates that are yours with your jungler isn't the best way of snowballing and carrying games. You really want to get all that money for yourself. Now, to truly be the super annoying ranged top laner that you all hate playing against after the lane phase ends, you want to transition into almost a purely split pushing style. It's not that you can't teamfight. In fact, you can do quite well in teamfights. Don't avoid them entirely. But split pushing is really overpowered in solo queue, and most ranged tops fall under the categories that make good side laners. Let's break those down. The first is being a good duelist. Naturally, you can't split push that well unless you can 1v1 the other designated side laner. That being said, that's usually going to be the enemy top lane. And if you won lane versus the enemy top laner, that means that you can probably still beat them 1v1 later on into the game with your lead, which in a roundabout way makes you a pretty darn good duelist. So that's one reason why you would want to stay in a side lane. Not only that, but most top lane ranged champions tend to be scaling carries, which naturally have solid wave clear. Being in sides all game lets you have way more access to jungle camps that you can constantly farm to really snowball your lead out of control. And obviously being able to push quickly also means being able to pressure towers a lot better. It goes without saying that this is a nice quality to have as a split pusher. You may feel a little uneasy having to split push without teleport like we said, but this isn't that big of an issue. Much like a normal side lane champion, you will obtain objectives for your team just by constantly baiting the enemy team into sending multiple members to try and kill you. This will naturally lead to numbers advantages for your teammates near Dragon or Baron, allowing them to get it for free instead of having to coin flip fight over an objective. So yeah, you ideally want to stay in a side lane with your double combat summoner spells to really dominate the map by yourself. But if not having teleport is bothering you so much, you can always just group up anyway. You don't need teleport to do that. Anyway, that is all you need to know to become the most annoying ranged top abuser. Follow these simple guidelines and you'll be dominating the lane and map in no time. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.